I never told anyone the real reason she left. Silas said it quietly. Not to the cameras, not to his board, but to himself. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't a betrayal. It was a choice. One he made with a clean face and a full calendar. And now, 2 years later, the woman he once pushed away with silence sat across from him again. Only now, she belonged to another company. The cameras still loved him. But the transaction he regretted most was never recorded. Silas Crane looked exactly how America expected him to look. Composed, groomed, crisp gray suit, tie pinned perfectly, watch timed to the second. The conference hall lights caught the side of his face as he leaned in to shake the hand of a Department of Transportation official. He smiled like it cost nothing. Behind that smile, numbers rolled through his mind. Budget lines, power grid, timelines. And Eleanor Hart's name slipped into a last-minute meeting brief like a footnote nobody expected him to notice. But he noticed. Her name hadn't crossed his inbox in 23 months. Not since the day she left Crane and Volt without a warning, a whisper, or a single word in person. Just a resignation email sent after midnight, and a quietly cleared office before anyone arrived the next morning. There was blow up? No scandal. She simply stopped staying where she wasn't safe. Now she was back. But not here. Not in this hall. Not in his space. Tomorrow morning, she'd be seated across a table from him. Because her firm, Harton Systems, had just won a bid to co-lead the new national transport overhaul alongside his. The federal contract required shared implementation between the two tech firms. Not a merger, a partnership, but everything that came with it. Joint approvals, project audits, press strategy, meant they'd be working side by side again. The woman he hadn't been able to talk to was now unavoidable. He watched the official walk away and nodded politely at the next introduction. But his mind stayed on her, on the quiet pause she always left after asking a hard question, on the way she never raised her voice, but always made her point, on how she used to sit in silence instead of arguing, and how, sometimes, that silence felt louder than truth. The next morning, the boardroom sat in full quiet. The Seattle skyline stretched behind them, cold glass and overcast clouds, high above the noise of the street. 15 people sat around the conference table. Project leads, legal heads, federal observers, not a single one unaware of the tension built into the day. Eleanor Hart entered the room on time. She wore a dark blazer, charcoal gray. No jewelry. Her laptop was open before she even sat down. Her pen moved slowly. No fumbling, no nerves. Silas entered 30 seconds later. He didn't look at her. She didn't look at him. The meeting began with a government liaison laying out objectives and compliance expectations. Nothing dramatic. All protocol. The focus was nationwide infrastructure, systems integration, secure platforms, predictive modeling. Silas spoke first, outlining Crane and Volt's capabilities. Eleanor followed, detailing Harton Systems' predictive software. Her voice was calm, low, exact. She never glanced his way, but every time she paused for input, Silas stepped in. Not aggressively, not possessively, just like he always used to. Their rhythm hadn't left them, but now it was laced with restraint. The project manager proposed cross-team sign-offs, delegated by each firm's executive board. "I'll be handling sign-offs on our end," Silas said. There was pause. Not a big one, but anyone familiar with boardroom cadence knew. That wasn't the plan. Heads turned. One of his VPs gave him a subtle look. This unusual. Silas had personally signed off on a project only once in the last 3 years, and that was during a political security breach. But now, on a contract that was already stable, he was reinserting himself. Eleanor's face didn't move. She simply nodded. Understood. The meeting continued. Later that afternoon, in the parking structure beneath the building, Silas stood by his car with the engine off. His phone buzzed with 5 unread messages, 2 internal memos, and a question from legal about cross-party confidentiality. He answered none of them. He sat still. The hum of electric engines, the shuffle of heels across concrete, the distant sound of a ventilation system, all passed through him. He'd looked at her briefly, not when she spoke, but when she listened. Her expression hadn't changed. Her eyes were steady. Her hands moved with the same efficiency they always had. But there was something missing. Not warmth, not resentment. It was trust, not the kind that said, "I believe in you." The kind that once said, "I'll be honest, and you'll hold it without using it against me." That kind was gone, and he had no one to blame. Eleanor stood in front of her mirror that night, hair wrapped in a towel, phone set to silent. The conference had gone exactly as expected. Silas hadn't challenged her. He hadn't interrupted. And for some reason, that stung more than if he had. She had prepared herself for discomfort, for irritation, but not for the hollow precision of 2 people who once shared so much, now pretending they were nothing but strategic assets. She wiped the steam from the mirror and stared at herself. Same lines, same eyes, but tighter now, not out of bitterness, just boundaries. She had built her company from scratch in 2 years. No outside investment, no favors. She had grown small and smart and careful. And now she had to survive 6 months of contract work with the man who once held her future in his hand and let it slide between his fingers because he didn't want to admit she mattered more than optics. The next day, their teams met again. Smaller group, more technical, fewer distractions. Eleanor corrected a projection in Silas's shared document. He didn't argue. He just revised it. There was no good catch. No thanks. No familiarity. Only correction. Submission. Next topic. They moved like strangers who remembered each other's pace, but not their names. Till the end, Eleanor stayed back to recheck one of the compliance points. The room cleared. She didn't rush. Silas walked in. Tie loosened now. Jacket slung over his arm. I wasn't sure if you'd still be here, he said. Neither was I, she replied, without looking up. For a second, time flowed. Not in a romantic way, but in that awkward, barely there tension that makes you wonder whether to say more or let things end. She didn't say anything else. She shut her laptop. He stepped aside to let her pass. She walked out, and he stood still, staring at the chair where she had sat. It still held shape, like her presence never left. Have you ever stood in the same room with someone who used to feel like home and realized they now treat you like a guest? When silence replaces resentment, sometimes it means something deeper. Not anger, not avoidance, but the quiet cost of unspoken truths. What would it take for you to speak first? The resignation came on a Thursday. It was 12:07 a.m. when Silas opened the email. Simple subject line. No emotion in the body. No dramatic send-off. Just a firm, complete sentence. Effective immediately. I resign from my position at Crane and Volt. Eleanor Hart. He read it again, blinking once, twice. Then he stood from his desk. Outside his office window, Seattle's skyline blinked under low clouds. The building was empty. The cleaning crew was long gone. His office light was the last one on. He walked to the glass, phone still in hand. There was no way she would do this without warning. Except she had no call, no final meeting, no explanation, just a 14-word message and a permanent goodbye. He opened the employee management dashboard. Her profile was already marked offboarded. Email forwarded to HR. Access credentials revoked by her own request. By 9 a.m., she was a ghost. No one asked questions. Because Eleanor had never been the kind of leader who left noise in her wake. She left systems that ran themselves, calendars that reminded others, teams that knew what to do without micromanagement. She left silently because noise wasn't her way. In the days after, the whispers began. Maybe she got another offer. Family illness, maybe. Wasn't she working too much? I think she and Silas had a falling out. Silas said nothing. Not to the board, not to his advisors, not to the few friends who thought they were close enough to ask. He didn't explain because he wasn't sure what the truth was either. Their working relationship had been the backbone of Crane and Volt for 3 years. He was the strategist. She was the builder. Together, they had expanded the company's federal division and tripled contracts. Their chemistry wasn't flashy, but it was unshakable. Some called her his second brain. Others thought she was the quiet counterweight to his spotlight. What no one saw, what no one was supposed to see, was how blurred things had become. Late nights turned into long conversations. Inside jokes, pauses that lasted too long, plans that included weekends. "It's easier if we do it ourselves," they both said more than once. Until one night, sitting in a car after a late investor dinner, Eleanor said nothing for over 10 minutes. She didn't reach for her seatbelt, didn't turn to him. Finally, Silas asked, "What's wrong?" She looked at him, not coldly, but clearly. "We crossed a line 6 months ago, and you know it." He didn't deny it. He didn't admit it either. Instead, he said, "Everything's still working." That was the last real conversation they had outside of email. 3 months later, he saw her name mentioned at a pitch event. Harton Systems, a lean, agile startup focused on civic tech innovation. She was listed as the founder and CEO. He didn't call her, but that night he pulled up the pitch deck online. It was sharp, clean, confident. The last page read, "Designed by people who know what staying silent costs." He closed the file and went back to work. Now, 2 years later, she sat across from him in a boardroom again. Just not on his payroll. She was her own name now, not someone tied to his brand, not a title beneath his. He watched her in the post-meeting chatter. She smiled once, quickly, at a young engineer's nervous joke. She offered a brief correction to a policy term someone fumbled. She didn't fill space unnecessarily. Still efficient. Till clear, but didn't look at him once. And it hit him harder than the night she left. Because back then, he could tell himself there would be time to fix it. Now, she was here on her own merit, and she didn't need to say a word to prove it. That night, he couldn't sleep. He opened the email again. Still 14 words. He kept rereading the timestamp. 12:07 a.m. She hadn't scheduled it. She'd typed it out and hit send while he was probably still in the building. Had she waited to make sure he was still inside? Had she watched his light from the garage? Had she wanted him to see it in real time? He didn't know. He wouldn't ask. But thought followed him. Across the city, Eleanor sat on her sofa with a cup of green tea and a spreadsheet open on her screen. She wasn't thinking about the meeting. She was thinking about the moment 2 years ago when she realized staying at Crane and Volt would mean slowly losing her own voice. Silas didn't do harm. He did hesitation. He never argued with her, never dismissed her in public. But in the moments that mattered, boardroom votes, compensation splits, public credits, he made sure his name was mentioned first. Not out of malice, out of instinct. He was still learning how to share space with someone who didn't need to be managed. and she was tired of waiting for him to choose clarity over comfort. She finished her tea, closed the spreadsheet, and powered down. She'd made peace with her decision, but it didn't mean it stopped costing her. Not every departure is caused by disaster. Sometimes people leave when they realize silence is the loudest signal they'll ever get. Have you ever stayed too long in a situation that worked on paper, but chipped away at your self-worth in private? Let me know in the comments. Your story might help someone find their own clarity. Eleanor stepped into the project coordination room 5 minutes early. She always did. Her laptop was open, sleeves rolled once at the cuff, and a mechanical pencil resting across her thumb as she reviewed the morning's integration schema. The door opened. Silas entered. Their eyes met for the first time since the conference room. Just for a second. She gave a nod, not quite polite, not cold either. He returned it, equally measured. "Morning," she said, eyes back on the document. "Morning." That was all of the team members trickled in, some from Harton Systems, others from Crane and Volt. A few were junior analysts, bright-eyed, a little tense. Most knew the backstory. They didn't speak it, but it lived in the room's air. The meeting began. Today was about compliance infrastructure, integration between Eleanor's adaptive transport forecast models and Silas's firm's real-time system tracking. The task was technical, impersonal, logistical, but Eleanor noticed that every time Silas leaned forward to speak, the junior engineers looked her way, not because they expected her to interrupt, but because they were watching for something unspoken. She didn't give them anything. When Silas spoke, she listened. She didn't nod, didn't frown, just listened. When it was her turn, she presented sharp and clean, one slide at a time. Minimal transitions, clear logic, the kind of presentation style that doesn't compete. It controls without dominating. Silas didn't ask questions. He only added one clarification. "There's a time delay risk in rural area data centers," he said. "We might need a signal handoff protocol mid-transition." Eleanor responded instantly. "We've built one. I'll send the model after this." He didn't thank her, but he wrote it down. She saw him do it. It used to mean something when he took notes. It used to mean he was trying to learn her pace. Now, it just looked like habit. The meeting ended 20 minutes early. Neither of them moved first. Afterward, Eleanor stepped out into the hallway, phone in hand, already answering a Slack thread. Silas followed. They ended up walking in the same direction, a few paces apart, silent. Then, against her better judgment, she spoke first. "That wasn't your usual team in there," she said. "No, I rotated people in last quarter, trying to groom a successor." He glanced at her, trying not to be the only one who knows what's happening. A pause. She nodded once, almost impressed. That's new. He didn't respond, but she noticed something about his walk. Slower than she remembered. Not tired, just less. Driven, less sharp-edged. They reached the elevator bay, still side by side. She looked at him fully for the first time in over 2 years. You said you'd handle sign-offs directly. Why? His reply was immediate. I don't want my team filtering decisions that affect yours. She frowned, not because she didn't believe him, but because the answer came too fast. Clean, too clean. You're not here to make it easier for me, she said. I'm here to make sure I don't repeat what I did last time. She tilted her head slightly. You mean letting the structure do your work for you? He looked at her, and for once, there was no shield. I mean hiding behind systems instead of asking better questions. The elevator opened. She didn't step in. He did. The doors closed before she looked away. Later that day, Eleanor opened her inbox to find a short message from Silas. Subject: Signal handoff protocol attached. Model draft notes integrated into real-time base. No assumptions made. Let me know where you'd prefer to diverge. No small talk. No qualifiers. Just work. But the phrasing made her pause. No assumptions made. He never used to say that. She stared at the message for a long second before opening the file. The draft was better than expected. Sharp, flexible, structurally sound. He had done his homework. She added one comment and changed 3 variables. Then sent it back. That night, she stayed late. Just her and a junior associate who was trying to troubleshoot a compatibility issue. Around 9:30, she walked past the executive wing to pick up a backup laptop charger someone left on her desk. Silas's office light was still on. Through the glass, she saw him sitting at his table, not his desk. No laptop, just a legal pad and pen. He didn't see her. He was writing, slowly, like someone who had no reason to rush. She kept walking. The next day brought their first real disagreement. It wasn't hostile. It was subtle. Silas had approved a system patch that Eleanor's team flagged for redundancy. In the joint channel, she sent a message. Batch 12 billion. Is this an update for optics or stability? He replied, stability, in theory, but it's mostly risk narrative. She answered, then you know, it compromises efficiency for politics. We're not here to waste bandwidth protecting brands. There was a long pause before he responded. Agreed. Pulling it now. Reworking without spin. That was the end of it. No defensiveness, no ego, but also no apology. And for some reason, that mattered more, because 2 years ago, he would have justified the decision. Now, he corrected it. Without needing to win. Narrator commentary CTA. Mid-chapter 2. Sometimes healing doesn't look like grand apologies. Sometimes it's just someone not repeating the mistake you remember too well. Has anyone in your life changed in a quiet way without asking for recognition? Did it speak louder than a confession? The next meeting was off-site, a project walkthrough in an adaptive control center near SeaTac. Concrete walls, low ceilings, bright fluorescent lights. Eleanor arrived early again. She didn't expect to see Silas already there, standing alone in the server room, watching a predictive dashboard refresh with live highway data. She stepped in, and he turned toward her, not startled. "Ready? It's working," he said. She looked past him at the screen. Traffic signals adjusting in real time. Rural lane bottlenecks predicted 12 minutes out. She didn't respond immediately, then quietly, "Did you ever wonder if we were just good at this because we knew how to avoid things?" He didn't ask what she meant. He knew. "Yes," he said. "And now?" she asked. He looked at her. "Now, I'm trying not to avoid myself." She blinked. He didn't look away, and that was the first moment she saw something she hadn't expected from him. Not regret, but effort. Sincere, quiet effort. She didn't smile. She didn't thank him. She simply walked past him to the system console. "You still label your lines wrong," she said. He raised an eyebrow. She pointed. "That one. You always put function before filter." He grinned. "I still do." She nodded. "You always did." And for the first time since she returned, they laughed. Not for long, but long enough. The next 2 weeks passed with a strange kind of ease. Eleanor wasn't sure what unsettled her more, how much had changed, or how little. Silas didn't overstep. He didn't hover. He didn't pretend nothing happened, either. He simply did the work. He joined calls on time. He responded to flagged documents. When her team disagreed, he pushed back respectfully, but never with force. And when she spoke, he listened. Not with performative patience, but with genuine attention. He paused after she finished, considered, responded. They didn't fall into old habits. They didn't flirt, didn't reminisce, but they moved in rhythm. And that rhythm was starting to feel familiar in a way she hadn't expected. Late one evening, Eleanor sat alone in her office, with the lights dimmed. A warm lamp lit her desk, and the hum of the street outside filled the silence. Her calendar was open. So was her browser. She stared at a news headline from 2 days ago. Crane and Volt secures West Coast cybersecurity grant. The article featured Silas in a dark suit, shaking hands with a federal coordinator. His smile was small, restrained. Eleanor stared at the image for a long time, not because she missed him, but because she couldn't tell if that man, the public man, was ever real. Had she ever really known him? Or had she just known the version of him who existed in private, off stage, off script? Was the smile for cameras the same one she used to get? Or was hers the only real one? She closed the tab, went back to work, but her thoughts lingered. Not out of longing, out of curiosity and caution. The next morning brought a surprise. A printed report left on her desk. No note, but she knew the handwriting on the cover tab. Silas. He'd compiled a side-channel vulnerability risk assessment. Something no one asked for. Something no one expected. It cross-referenced weather-related system failures, rural signal lapses, and patch cascade errors. It was thorough. She flipped through the pages. At the very end, he'd handwritten one question. What would you build differently if no one expected you to explain it? She sat back. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't manipulation. It was an honest question, and it felt like the first time in a long while that someone had asked her something for no reason other than wanting to know the answer. She didn't respond. Not yet. She needed to think about it. Later that day, they met for a joint audit review with the federal compliance team. The discussion was tense. Nothing to do with them. The agency reps were pushing for data backup protocols that threatened to bloat the system's efficiency. Silas could have caved, could have given the safe corporate answer, but he didn't. Instead, he turned slightly to Eleanor. Your call, he said. You designed the predictive layer. If you don't support the backup conditions, I won't push them. She looked at the agents across the table, calmly explained why the condition would slow decision modeling. Silas didn't speak again. He just watched her do what she was always good at, owning the moment. And she didn't shrink. Not once. Afterward, she stayed behind to pack her things. He hovered by the door. You used to let me override you in those meetings, he said, voice low. I used to think that was the price of peace, she replied. He didn't flinch. She didn't say it to hurt him. She said it because it was true. Did it work? He asked. No, she said, but I wanted to see if you'd notice. I didn't. She looked at him, and this time she saw it. Shame, quiet and unmasked. I should have, he added. She nodded. You didn't want to. There's a difference. That moment lasted only seconds, but it reshaped everything. Not because they resolved anything, but because they finally named what had been missing all along, a willingness to see each other clearly. 2 nights later, Eleanor stayed late again. Her team had gone home. She sat alone, eyes tired, rereading code documentation, when a soft knock tapped the glass door. Silas stood outside, holding 2 paper cups. She opened the door. Decaf, he said, offering one. Didn't know how late you were staying. She hesitated, then took it. "Thanks. I'm heading out," he said. "Thought I'd pass by." He didn't step into the office, didn't linger, but before turning to leave, he added, "That question I asked about building without explaining, if you ever want to answer it, I'm still listening." She didn't say anything. She just nodded, and he walked away. That weekend, Eleanor sat on her balcony in sweats, a throw blanket across her legs, coffee growing cold beside her. She opened her notes app and typed, "What would I build differently? I'd make the system read trust the way it reads failure. I'd make the default setting lean toward human risk, not machine error. I'd stop designing protocols that protect people who avoid the truth. I'd make space for the ones who speak up first, quietly, before it's too late." She didn't send it, but writing it helped, because it reminded her that she hadn't left because of drama. She left because silence had started to sound like strategy. And now, slowly, she was learning how to hear something different. The email arrived with a red exclamation mark, sent to Silas, CC'd to legal, and marked confidential. It came from Victor Lang, one of Crane and Volt's oldest and most vocal board members. The subject line was direct: project risk, harden systems, conflict. Silas read it once. Then again, inside, Lang outlined a concern regarding Eleanor's role in the joint federal contract. He framed it as a question of optics, citing her former position at Crane and Volt, her unacknowledged personal history with executive leadership, and her increasing strategic influence on the Joint Task Force. The message ended with this line: "It is my belief that continued involvement from Ms. Hart introduces reputational exposure and conflict of interest potential. I recommend immediate reassignment of her project duties." Silas stared at the screen. His jaw tightened. He knew Victor Lang's game. The man rarely made emotional moves. He didn't send warnings like this unless he had already started making phone calls behind the scenes. It was leverage disguised as concern, and it meant one thing: someone had seen the rhythm between Eleanor and Silas and decided it was dangerous, not romantic, strategic. And in Lang's world, strategic loyalty that couldn't be controlled was a threat. Silas didn't forward the email. He didn't respond. He closed his laptop and sat back in his chair. Across the city, Eleanor stood at a whiteboard with her team. They were troubleshooting an unexpected response lag in the weather routing module. The energy in the room was focused, relaxed. She didn't know her name was being floated in emails as a liability. She didn't know decisions were being discussed without her. She was building systems, leading teams, doing what she always did, delivering clean work, until her assistant knocked on the door with a printed memo. "From the shared folder," he said quietly. It wasn't addressed directly to her, but someone had made sure she saw it. The title read, "Reputation Risk Outline, Merge Phase 2. Her name was highlighted twice, Eleanor read it carefully. Not once did it accuse her of misconduct, but it painted a picture, one meant to plant doubt. Terms like influence, overlap, personal history, contract authority, and optics sensitivity. No one had signed it, but she didn't need a name. She knew, and she knew what would come next. Back at Crane and Volt, Silas met privately with his general counsel. "Lang's pushing this," the attorney said. "He's already contacted 2 other board members. They're framing it as a governance concern." Silas folded his arms. "We don't remove someone from a project because her name makes shareholders uncomfortable." "I agree. But if this gets public..." Silas cut him off. "Then let it..." Silas, he didn't raise his voice, but the tone was final. "She left clean. She built her own firm. She's not riding this company's shadow. She deserves to be in this project." The counsel paused. "Are you willing to put your name behind that publicly?" Silas didn't hesitate. Yes, and that was the beginning of the fallout. Eleanor didn't react the way people expected. She didn't rush to confront anyone. She didn't send legal threats. She didn't even cancel her afternoon meetings. She stayed calm, but that night, she stayed in the office 2 hours late. She sat at her desk and thought about all the times she'd stepped aside in the past, quietly, gracefully, to avoid being labeled difficult. How many meetings she'd softened her tone in. How many late-night emails she'd rewritten to sound non-confrontational. How many men in her position would be described as visionary, while she got called strategic risk. She wasn't angry. She was tired. And this time, she wasn't stepping back. At 11:19 p.m., her phone rang. Known number. She picked up. "I'm not removing you from this project," Silas said quietly. Eleanor didn't respond right away. "I know about the memo," she said. "I know." She took a slow breath. "You didn't write it?" "No, but you didn't stop it either." He didn't deny it. "I should have," he said. Another silence. Then, softly, she asked, "Why are you calling now?" "Because I read the memo, and I realized it said more about me than about you." Her voice didn't change. "And what did it say?" "That I've built a system where someone like you is seen as a threat. Not because you're reckless, but because you won't play submissive." That stopped her. She didn't know whether to feel respected or sad. "I'm staying on the project," she said. "I know you don't have to defend me." "I'm not," he replied. "I'm correcting a mistake." This time, the silence between them wasn't cold. Was full, still present. Then, quietly, he said, "You did nothing wrong." She didn't say thank you, because she wasn't asking for favor, but she stayed on the call. Neither of them spoke again. They just stayed. The next morning, internal staff woke to a company-wide bulletin from the executive office of Crane and Volt. It didn't name Lang, but it clarified that all project roles were maintained and that executive oversight would remain distributed between both firms as previously structured. It ended with a line that read, "Respect is not a variable. It's a constant built into every decision." Eleanor didn't respond. She didn't need to. She showed up on time, delivered clean work, trusted her process, and never let her tone shake. 3 days after Silas issued the company-wide memo, Victor Lang responded the only way he knew how: silence and strategy. He didn't argue in public. He didn't push back on the record. He simply stopped returning Silas's calls. 2 other board members, those who once shared Lang's skepticism, now avoided offering opinions at all. They wanted plausible deniability if the issue escalated. That was the board's culture. Control the perception, not the process. Silas didn't chase their approval. Instead, he met privately with his legal team, comms director, and project compliance lead. "I'm not explaining the decision again," he said calmly. "We've already made it. Now we prepare, in case someone takes it to press." His head of communications nodded. "Do you want to preempt the story or wait to respond?" "Wait," Silas said. "We jump first. We give it more oxygen." The legal lead leaned in. "And what if Lang leaks anyway?" Silas didn't hesitate. "Then I'll take the heat directly." No one argued, because in that room, unlike the boardroom, his authority was unquestioned. But authority wasn't the same as clarity. Not when it came to Eleanor. Eleanor, for her part, stayed focused. She didn't waver, didn't raise her voice, didn't adjust her tone in meetings. She corrected bad data, pushed through lagging updates, and responded to every audit request with clarity and professionalism. She was aware that the memo had made people whisper. She saw the shift, how a few new analysts hesitated around her, or over-explained things they didn't need to. But she also saw how her senior leads followed her example. No dramatics, no panic, only performance. The day after Silas's bulletin, she received flowers, white calla lilies, no card. She knew they were from him. She didn't display them, but she didn't throw them out either. They stayed in the corner of her office for exactly 3 days. Then she took them home, wrapped in brown paper, and placed them in a tall glass vase beside her bookshelf. She didn't know what it meant, only that it felt like a pause, a human one, and she was willing to accept it, even if she didn't return it. At the next joint strategy session, the room felt still. Silas walked in last, nodded to Eleanor first. No eye contact, no words, but there was a quiet respect in the room, subtle, intentional. When the integration review began, one of the compliance heads asked whether roles would shift now that Phase 2 was entering implementation. Silas didn't look at his team. He looked at Eleanor. Leadership stays as is, he said. No one is being replaced. Simple, flat, final. The room adjusted. Eleanor didn't respond out loud, but she tapped her pen once on her notepad and moved on to the next item on the agenda. Later, in the hallway, Silas caught up to her. She didn't stop walking, but he walked beside her, voice low. I'm not waiting for a thank you, he said. I'm not offering one, she replied. He glanced sideways. Then what? What are we doing? She paused at the elevator. We're working, she said. That's it. She faced him fully. For now, she said, because I've seen what it looks like when we forget that. He nodded, didn't try to soften the truth. And when the elevator opened, he let her step in alone. That night, Eleanor stayed at the office late again. Second week in a row. She wasn't trying to avoid anyone, but there was a comfort in working while the city slowed down. No noise, no interruptions, no board politics or press threats, just code, system feedback, and her own sense of order. At 8:46 p.m., her phone buzzed. One line from Silas. Board's meeting tomorrow. Lang's pushing for private arbitration. She stared at it. She didn't reply, but didn't delete it either. The next day, Silas stood in front of the board, hands clasped behind his back. No slides, no performance. Just him. I won't use this time to argue over optics, he said, because optics have always been subjective. Lang raised an eyebrow, but stayed silent. This is not a defense of Eleanor Hart's character, Silas continued. She doesn't need that. What I'm here to say is simpler. You either trust my leadership or you don't. And if you don't, I'm the one you challenge, not her. One of the older board members cleared his throat. You're making this personal, Silas. No, I'm making it accountable, he replied. Lang finally spoke. You've never put anyone in that kind of position before. Silas met his gaze. Maybe that's the problem. He didn't wait for applause. There wasn't any, but there was no motion passed. No arbitration filed. No action taken, which, in a boardroom like that, was the closest thing to a concession. Eleanor never asked what happened. Silas never told her, but she felt it in the way people stopped watching her quite so closely, in the way updates flowed again without second-guessing, in the way trust resumed, not from scratch, but from memory. It was a Tuesday morning, and the room smelled like coffee and staged importance. The Crane and Volt press conference had been planned weeks ago, long before the Lang situation. Officially, it was about Phase 2 progress. Unofficially, everyone knew it was about control. Control of the narrative. Control of the partnership. Control of the perception that anything at all, was wrong. Silas stood behind the podium. Sleeves buttoned. Tie knotted neatly. Cameras blinked across the room. Reporters leaned forward, pens twitching. Recorders aimed. He looked like the man they wanted him to be. Unshaken, polished, prepared. The joint implementation remains on schedule, he said. We're hitting all our federal benchmarks, and user feedback in pilot cities has exceeded expectations. A few nods, scribbled notes. Nothing new. But then came the question. A woman from the Post raised her hand. There's been some speculation about internal disagreements. Can you speak to reports that governance concerns were raised about Heartened Systems' role? A pause. Silas didn't glance at his notes. He looked directly at her. I can, he said, and I will. Ms. Hart's leadership has been essential to the progress we've made. The only concern worth raising is how long it took some of us to acknowledge that. A few murmurs. Eyebrows lifted. Another reporter followed up. Was there ever a point where her involvement was considered a conflict? Silas's voice didn't change. There's a difference between a conflict of interest and a challenge to comfort. One deserves action. The other deserves reflection. The room fell quiet. For a man who'd built his reputation on safe statements, it was as close to raw as he'd ever gone. He moved on quickly. More slides, more stats, but the moment lingered. And by noon, social media was already picking it apart. Eleanor watched the replay from her desk. She wasn't looking for validation. She just needed to know if he'd said what people claimed. He had, word for word. She closed the tab before it finished. She wasn't interested in public theater. Not anymore. But what stuck with her wasn't the soundbite. It was the way he said, reflection. Not apology, not regret, but reflection. Like he'd finally started asking questions he used to avoid. That mattered because it wasn't for her. It was for himself. That night, Silas didn't go home. He walked into a small bar on the waterfront where no one asked for selfies or speeches. He ordered black coffee, not because he needed it, but because it gave his hands something to hold. He sat in the corner booth and exhaled. Across the room, two men argued quietly about startup funding. A woman FaceTimed her child. A man in a worn jacket asked for the check without looking up. Life moved on, even when the cameras shut off. He pulled a notebook from his coat, same one he used before Eleanor left the company. It was mostly empty, except for one line, written in his handwriting. When you remove someone from your world to protect your image, don't be surprised when their silence exposes you. He hadn't understood it when he wrote it. Now it felt like a mirror. The next morning, Eleanor's inbox was flooded. Journalists, board members, former colleagues, even 2 tech podcasters asking if she'd do a public interview. She declined them all. She didn't owe the public her version. She only owed herself clarity, and that meant not getting pulled into noise. Instead, she forwarded one short article to her team, highlighting the section where Silas had named her leadership. "Keep doing the work," she wrote. "That's the only response we need." Meanwhile, Silas faced quiet fallout. Lang called him once, didn't leave a message. 3 client accounts requested additional documentation to ensure compliance objectivity. A few donors pulled back from a future R&D summit. Nothing dramatic, but the pressure was real. He met with his COA. "Should I walk back the comment?" he asked. The woman, a quiet strategist named Bryn, raised an eyebrow. "Do you regret it?" "No." "Then don't insult it." He nodded slowly. "The board's going feel the tremor." "They should," Bryn said. "They built the floor crooked." That afternoon, Silas walked past the design lab and caught sight of one of Eleanor's junior engineers. Liam, maybe. The kid looked barely 30 and still carried himself like every task was a test. Silas stopped. "Do you like working under her?" he asked, nodding toward Eleanor's name on the task board. The kid blinked. "Yes, sir. She listens. And she doesn't babysit." Silas almost smiled. "Good. That's rare. She's not afraid to say no, either." "I remember." He walked on. That evening, Eleanor sat at her dining table with the lights low. A single lamp glowed above a small potted plant, and a bowl of soup sat cooling beside her laptop. She opened the same notebook she'd used when she left Crane and Volt, the one she hadn't written in since. She flipped past pages of outlines, sketches, risk models, and started a new page. At the top, she wrote, "Power doesn't have to announce itself. It remembers its value, even when others try to rewrite it." She paused. Then underneath, in smaller handwriting, "And sometimes, the person who once stayed silent is finally watching you listen." She closed the notebook, not because she was done, but because she'd written enough for now. 2 days after the press conference, Eleanor's name trended online. She didn't know it at first. Her phone was off. Her team was deep in deployment testing, and she was helping troubleshoot a stalled data bridge in the Chicago pilot zone. It wasn't until lunchtime that someone on her team hesitantly slid a phone across the table. "You might want to see this," he said. The screen showed a forum thread titled "Hart and Crane, Quiet Power Couple," or "Quiet Conflict." Screenshots followed, images of calendar entries from 3 years ago. Dinner reservations in the same cities where Crane and Volt had field tests. A blurry photo of Silas and Eleanor walking out of a late-night building. No kissing, no touching, but enough proximity for people to fill in the blanks. Anonymous posters had started piecing together a theory that Eleanor's influence in the current joint project was not professional, but personal. Someone had gone digging. She scrolled in silence, her stomach tightening, not with fear, but fatigue. The kind that settles into your chest when you realize the world still expects you to explain yourself just for existing near a man with power. She stood slowly. Who else has seen this? She asked her assistant. Everyone. Eleanor nodded. Then she walked into her office, shut the door, and sat without moving. Silas saw the leak 30 minutes later. Bryn, his COO, delivered the news flatly. It's a thread with traction. No source named, no confirmed documentation, but it's picking up views. Are there any formal claims? He asked. None? It's all implication, circling. No one's published it yet. He exhaled through his nose. They will? He said. Yes, Bryn agreed. Unless we kill the oxygen. He didn't ask what she meant. He already knew. I'll handle it, he said. Alone? He nodded. She didn't argue, but as she left, she said quietly, Make sure you're not doing this for optics. I'm not, he said. And for once, he was sure. That evening, Eleanor disappeared. No emails, no calls, no messages to her team. Her assistant covered for her without being asked. She's reviewing code integrity offline, he told anyone who asked. Silas knew better. He tried calling once. It rang, then went to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. Instead, he walked to the place he hadn't been in almost a year. The cafe was on the coast, small, unassuming, tucked between a used bookstore and a shoe repair shop. They used to come here during rollout weeks. Back then, they called it neutral ground. Eleanor was already there. No makeup, hoodie pulled over her hair, no laptop in sight. Just a cup of lukewarm tea and a table in the farthest corner. She didn't look up when he entered. Knew. He slid into the seat across from her. No greetings, no apologies. She spoke first. I know it wasn't you. I still didn't stop it fast enough. She said nothing. He leaned forward slightly. I don't care about the gossip. I do, she replied, because they're not attacking my behavior. They're attacking my right to exist beside you. He fell silent. She continued, voice calm. They didn't find secrets. They found proximity, and that was enough. He swallowed hard. I should have told them the truth years ago. What truth? That I respected you more than anyone on my staff. That's not a scandal, Silas, she said. That's a standard. Another pause. Then he said, You mattered more than the company, and I never said it out loud. Her eyes flickered, but her voice remained steady. And when you didn't, I left. He nodded. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Inside, the cafe was quiet. No music, no voices, just the faint scrape of ceramic against wood as Eleanor moved her cup. You built something beautiful, he said. I had to. I couldn't wait for someone to give me room anymore. He looked at her, not as a colleague, not as a former partner, just a woman who'd rebuilt her life without needing to tear him down to do it. I kept it all professional, he said, almost to himself, because I thought that was the only way I wouldn't lose you. She looked at him evenly. You lost me anyway, and it landed not like a slap, like a fact, soft, final, true. They sat in silence after that, not waiting for forgiveness, not circling any kind of resolution, just two people in a place where no one expected them to prove anything. When she finally stood, he didn't ask where she was going. He didn't walk her. No, he just watched her leave. And when the bell above the door jingled, he whispered to no one, "Wrong transaction." The next morning, Eleanor showed up at work at 7 a.m. She greeted her team, logged into her station, and got back to work. No statement, no tweet, no denial, because her dignity didn't need defending. Her presence was the rebuttal, and every system she helped stabilize that day reinforced the truth. Her value wasn't up for debate. Silas released a short internal memo that same morning. No names mentioned, just 3 lines. Private lives are not public currency. Respect is not a privilege earned through distance. We will not respond to noise with compromise. He signed it himself. No initials, no comms department, just his name. And by noon, the leak had lost its legs. Sometimes people don't try to ruin your reputation. They just resent that you didn't need their permission to be excellent. Have you ever felt reduced to a rumor while still doing the work no one else could? Let us know how you kept going. The city's edge softened near the coast, where downtown Seattle blurred into wind and gray sky. The streets got quieter. No billboards, no investor banners, just salt air and the sound of waves moving against docked boats. Eleanor returned to the cafe the following Friday. No hoodie this time, no armor, just a plain navy jacket, jeans, and the kind of stillness that comes when you've made peace with being misunderstood. She didn't go to meet Silas, didn't text. She brought her notebook, ordered hot tea, sat at the same corner table. She didn't expect him to come. But 6:12 p.m., he walked in, not rushed, not dramatic, just present. She didn't invite him to sit. He did anyway. For a long time, they didn't speak. She flipped a page in her notebook. He watched the steam curl off his untouched cup. Then, finally, "I thought you might never talk to me again," he said quietly. Eleanor looked at him. I thought I might not either. Silas nodded slowly. But you're here. I'm here, she echoed, because silence is easier than honesty. But silence doesn't heal anything. He looked down. I used silence like a tool. No, she corrected. You used it like a shield. That landed because it was true. I didn't know how to name what we were, he said, or what we weren't. You didn't have to name it, she replied. You just had to treat it like it mattered. That shut him down for a second. He took a slow sip of his now cooling drink. Back then, she continued, I wasn't asking for a title. I wasn't asking for a public post or a label. I just wanted you to stop protecting the version of yourself the world liked better. Silas nodded. The polished version, the safe one, she said. Silence again. But this time, it felt earned, like air clearing. Outside, the light began to change. Golden hour made the street glow, even through overcast. Silas finally asked, Do you regret ever working with me? Eleanor shook her head immediately. No, you built your firm after leaving. Yes. Do you ever wish you'd started it sooner? She considered that. I think I needed to work under someone like you first, to understand how many ways a woman can shrink without realizing it. He didn't flinch. He didn't defend. That's fair, he said. Eleanor leaned forward, folding her hands loosely. I used to think being respected in private was enough, she said. I thought being listened to behind closed doors meant something. But now I know. If someone won't stand beside you when it counts, then it was never real respect. It was comfort. Silas looked away for a beat, then asked, Is there a version of this, of us, that still works? Eleanor didn't answer right away. Instead, she asked him a question of her own. When was the last time you chose presence over performance? Not for the company, not for optics, just for someone else's peace. Silas swallowed. It's been a while. Then maybe start there. She gathered her notebook, slid it into her bag, and stood. He stayed seated. I'm not asking you to fix anything, she said. Just to stop pretending you don't feel it. He nodded. And what do I do while I feel it? Let it change you, she said. Not your image. You. And she walked out. No hug. No promises. No second glance. But this time, he didn't feel left behind. He felt given a chance to do something with the silence instead of hiding behind it. Back in his condo that night, Silas sat with his phone in his hand. No apps open. No music playing. Just one old photo. Eleanor standing on a rooftop from a past project launch. Wind in her curls. No smile, but a calm in her face he hadn't appreciated then. He didn't text her. Instead, he opened a notebook of his own. Wrote one sentence: "Accountability without visibility still counts." He closed the book. Did post it. Didn't perform it. Didn't try to make it sound like redemption. Just sat with it. Alone. For once. Let it stay true. Monday morning came with gray skies and the hum of steady rain. Eleanor walked into headquarters, wearing all black. Not dramatic, just quiet, intentional, her expression calm, her presence grounded. Her assistant handed her a list of integration issues from the field teams, a few errors from weekend updates. Nothing alarming. She reviewed the list, gave a few directions, and settled into her work. No one asked about the cafe. No one brought up the leak. The noise had passed, but the tone had changed. People had stopped whispering. They watched instead. Not because they doubted her, but because her silence had power, and she carried it without asking permission. That afternoon, she stepped into a small coordination room, where Silas was already reviewing deployment metrics. He glanced up, then stood to give her space. "You're early," she said. "Trying not to waste time," he replied. She moved past him, checking the whiteboard notes. Then she said, almost casually, "You asked me something the other day." "I asked several things." "You asked if there's a version of us that still works." Silas nodded. Slowly, carefully, she didn't sit. She kept her distance, arms crossed, but not defensive. "I've thought about it," she said. "And the answer is yes." He looked at her, eyes steady, but only, she continued, "if it's built on truth, not on what we think we owe each other, not on fear, not on fixing the past." Silas nodded again, slower this time. "What does that truth require?" Eleanor took a breath. "It means we don't turn our care into currency. We don't exchange kindness for loyalty. We give it or we don't, but we don't negotiate it." He sat back. "That's fair." She took one step closer. "It means if you want space in my life again, you don't get to enter as the man you were when I left." A pause. "I don't," he said. "I know that. You're not here to rewrite the ending," she added. "You're here, if you choose to stay, as someone who finally understands that my voice was never a threat to your position, only your comfort." He didn't respond right away. Then, carefully, "You've always spoken like the truth was a full sentence." "It is," she said, "and I don't explain it anymore. I just live it." He stood, then, not to leave, but to match her posture, to meet her as an equal. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," he said. "I'm asking for your honesty. When it gets hard again, when my instinct is to retreat." She studied him, then nodded. "I can give that, as long as you don't confuse my clarity for criticism." "I won't." They stood in silence. But this time, the silence didn't protect anything. It revealed it. The next few weeks moved forward with quiet momentum. Meetings became smoother, feedback more direct, and Eleanor and Silas stopped walking on glass. They didn't perform a reunion, didn't linger after hours, didn't share long looks in public. They worked, and they learned to respect each other in new ways, not through rhythm or history, but through new, cleaner patterns. When they disagreed, they said so. When one of them needed space, they took it. When the merger's final audit landed, perfectly scored and ahead of schedule, neither of them claimed credit. They gave it to the team and quietly to themselves, because neither of them had sabotaged it by confusing the work with the wound. One evening, long after most had left, Silas walked past Eleanor's office. The light was on. The door was open. She was reading, not typing. She looked up. He paused. "I was about to head out," he said. She nodded. "Same." Then she added, "Thank you for not needing a narrative." He tilted his head. "For what?" "For this," she said, gesturing around her. "For letting the silence stay clean this time. No rebranding, no press moves, just space." He offered a faint smile. "I think I finally understand what peace costs, and I'm ready to pay it." She closed her folder and stood, walked toward him, and for the first time in over 2 years, she stood close enough to touch, but didn't. She looked him in the eye and said, "Then stop asking for what we had." "I'm not," he said. "I'm asking for what we can build now." She nodded once, then stepped past him. He turned to follow, but didn't. He let her leave first, not as a power move, as respect, because some spaces are only sacred when you don't try to fill them too soon. The quarterly board review was scheduled for 8 a.m. sharp. Silas arrived at 7:52. The room was already half full. Coffee cups, paper reports, idle conversation about forecasts and funding rounds. But the air was wide. Bryn stood near the corner, arms crossed. She didn't say much, but her eyes tracked everything. At 8:01, Victor Long walked in, wearing that usual mix of ease and authority. He shook no hands. He opened no folders. He sat. The chairperson, a mild-mannered man named Errol Gaines, opened the session. "We'll begin with executive summaries, then move to risk and governance items." Silas knew what that meant. It was coming. By 8/2004, they reached it. Lang cleared his throat and slid a document across the table. "I'd like to formally raise a discussion point on executive continuity and project transparency," he said, voice calm, "specifically in regard to the leadership arrangement with Hearton Systems and Mr. Crane's direct role in the oversight of that partnership." No one flinched. They'd all been waiting for it. Lang leaned back, folding his hands. "I believe the current structure places this board in an untenable position. The public perception, internal decision-making, and long-term risk of distraction or influence are no longer hypothetical. They are active. Errol glanced at Silas. Response? Silas folded his hands. The success metrics of this partnership are clear. We've surpassed projections. Compliance audits are clean. Client satisfaction is rising. What's being raised here is not performance. It's discomfort. Lang cut in. It's governance. No, Silas said, voice sharper. It's control. Silence. Then Lang said the thing everyone else was tiptoeing around. If you continue leading this project with MS Hart at equal footing, the board will consider your position compromised. There it was, the ultimatum. Silas had two choices. Distance himself from Eleanor professionally, or walk away from the deal entirely. He didn't speak for 10 seconds. He just looked at the document in front of him. Clean lines, typed language, no emotion, just control, dressed up in policy. Then he said, I need 48 hours. Lang raised an eyebrow. You've already had 2 years. I need 48 hours, Silas repeated. Then you'll have my decision. That night, he drove out of the city. No driver, no assistant, just him and a stretch of road that ran along the edge of Puget Sound. He pulled over near the old marina, turned off the car, rolled down the window, let the silence hit him like a wave. For years, he had made peace with being the man who always looked like he had answers, not because he was certain, but because certainty protected him. Certainty got investors to say yes, got partnerships through contracts, got uncomfortable truths sealed into strategy decks. But now he had to choose between protecting his company's comfort or honoring a woman who'd walked away not to punish him, but to preserve herself. And the question wasn't whether she'd take him back. It was whether he was willing to give up the version of success that only worked when she wasn't in the room. He sat there for an hour. Then he drove back, wrote a letter to the board. Meanwhile, Eleanor sat at her desk, reviewing final deployment numbers for the Florida launch. She'd heard nothing, wasn't waiting for an update. She'd been here before, on the edge of someone else's decision, watching them weigh what she was worth against what made them look safe. She wasn't bitter. She was clear. She knew this wasn't about her reputation anymore. It was about whether Silas had grown enough to stop treating respect like something you offer in secret. She didn't need loyalty. She needed alignment. The next morning, Silas submitted his response. The board received a 1-page statement. I will no longer lead the crane and volt side of the federal partnership. My decision is not about guilt or optics. It is about recognizing when integrity demands presence, not position. My name has weight in this industry. I intend to use it to protect the people I should have stood beside earlier. I will step down from the project oversight role effective immediately. He signed it, dated it, handed it to Errol directly. No fanfare, no performance. Just the truth, negotiated, There comes a moment when the cost of keeping your seat at the table is your own voice. Have you ever had to choose between what looked right and what was right? What did it cost you? Was it worth it? The email went out at 7:45 a.m. It was brief. From Silas Crane to all Crane and Volt project team subject. Transition update. Effective today, I'm stepping down from the executive oversight role on the Federal Joint Transport Initiative. Our goals remain unchanged. Execution continues under capable leadership. Let the work speak. Silas, no further explanation. No QA, just a clear line drawn. The silence that followed was heavy. Some employees speculated. Some board members bristled. A few senior staff sent messages asking if he was okay. Silas responded to none of them. He wasn't trying to control the story anymore. He was finally letting it unfold without him at the center. Eleanor got the message in the middle of a team sync. Her phone buzzed once. She glanced at it, then continued speaking. She finished walking through a systems load test, assigned one final task, and ended the meeting. Only then did she open the message fully. She read it twice, not because she didn't believe it, but because she hadn't expected him to do it now. She didn't cry, didn't smile, didn't text him. She just sat with moment, and quietly. She said to no one, finally. By midday, news outlets caught up. Silas Crane steps back from landmark federal project leadership. Reshuffle at Crane and Volt. Strategic or personal? Is this the end of Crane's oversight era? Most speculated without substance. Some hinted at the leak from weeks earlier. Others guessed at internal power struggles. Only one outlet got close. An op-ed in a niche business ethics column wrote, "Sometimes the real story isn't who got pushed out. It's who walked away so someone else could finally breathe." Eleanor read that one, saved the link, and sent it to her team. Not to celebrate, but to remind them this wasn't about drama. It was about choice. Silas didn't take calls for 2 days. He spent time with his father in Wenatchee. They walked an apple orchard, neither of them saying much. His father didn't ask about Eleanor, didn't mention the news. Only once, while checking the fruit lines, he said, "You look like a man who finally let go of something heavy." Silas didn't answer. He didn't need to. Back at the office, Eleanor finalized deployment files. She prepped for transition meetings. She updated documentation and rerouted certain approvals. She didn't ask to be placed in Silas's former position. She didn't have to. By Friday, the implementation team made it official. Harton Systems would co-lead the final rollout phase. No vote, no debate. Her work had already proven her. That evening, Silas walked into Eleanor's office unannounced. She was lone, desk cleared, ready to head home. She looked up, calm. He stood in the doorway. "I didn't come to explain." "Good," she said. "I don't need one." He stepped in, closed the door behind him, then spoke quietly. "I stepped back because I should have done it sooner. Not because someone forced me. Not because I wanted credit." She nodded. "No." He hesitated, then asked, "Did it mean anything to you?" Her gaze was steady. "It meant you finally made a decision without protecting yourself first." Silas exhaled. "I didn't expect it to feel like loss." "Because it is," she said, "but not the kind that breaks you. The kind that frees you from pretending." He lowered his eyes. "I still want to be in your life," he said. "I know, but not like before. I know, not under terms I set, without asking what you needed." She finally stood, walked over to him, face close. Not touching, just presence. "That's the only version that was ever going to work," she said. He searched her expression. "What happens now?" She smiled faintly. "We let time answer questions we used to rush." He nodded, didn't push, didn't ask for more. And when he turned to leave, she called out softly, "Silas." He looked back. "I don't need you to fight for me anymore." He nodded once. "I need you to walk with me when it's quiet, when there's nothing left to prove." His voice was soft. "I can do that." And for the first time, Eleanor felt what she'd been waiting on since the beginning. Not a gesture, not a win, just peace. Unforced, earned, present. The office Silas reserved was not in downtown Seattle. It wasn't even technically part of Crane and Volt property anymore. A few months earlier, he'd purchased a quiet 2-floor space in Fremont, intended to be a side project, maybe an incubator one day. But it was still unfinished. No logo on the door, no reception desk, just natural light, exposed beams, and a conference table that hadn't seen strategy decks or suits yet. That's where he asked Eleanor to meet him. No assistants, no titles, just them. When she arrived, he held the door open, but said nothing. She stepped in, looked around, then offered a small smile. "This feels unfinished." "It is," he said. "That's why I brought you here." She turned slowly. "Why?" "Because for once, I wanted to meet you somewhere. I haven't already made decisions." She paused, then nodded. It was the first time he'd said something that sounded more like reflection than persuasion. He gestured toward the table. She sat. He did the same. Between them sat a folder. No label, no envelope, just a single document inside. Eleanor didn't touch it. He spoke first. "There are shares," he said. "My Crane and Volt holdings in the joint company, formed through the contract." She didn't move. He continued, calm. You already lead the implementation. You deserve equity in what you built, not as a gesture, as a correction. Eleanor looked at him, long and slow. You know I don't need it, she said. I know, he replied. That's why I'm giving it. She studied him again, then finally opened the folder. He watched her read every line, every clause, everything clean and clear. Transfer of rights, no stipulations, no backdoor clauses, no voting privileges retained. Joe, a handoff, not of power, of trust. She closed the folder, looked up. Why now? She asked. Because I spent years thinking the best way to keep something valuable was to hold on to it, control it, define it. And now I understand that if it's real, you give it. Not because you expect something back, but because it's no longer yours to manage. Eleanor was quiet for a long time. Then she leaned forward. You're not here to be forgiven, are you? He shook his head. No. She tapped the folder once. Then, what is this? He answered without blinking. It's me, finally, saying yes. Yes to what? To the version of us that didn't need a press release, or a title, or a structure. The version where I didn't have to protect my name to protect you. That silenced her, but not in the way she used to go quiet. This time, it was the silence of something unknotted. She exhaled, let it sit, then said, "This doesn't fix the past. I know, and I'm not here to give you back the comfort you lost. No, I'm not asking for it." She placed both hands on the folder. Nod possessively, not urgently, just held it, then looked at him. Did it take losing everything to get here? Silas shook his head. It took, finally, being willing to lose the version of me that couldn't see you clearly. She stood slowly, folder still in hand, walked to the window, looked out over the quiet street, rain beating on the glass. Then, without turning back, she said, "You were never the company, Silas." He stood, too. "I know. I was never the risk. I see that now." She turned, folder at her side. "You could have had both," she said. "Mo, all we have is this moment, and I'm not wasting it," he said. She stepped closer, set the folder on the table again. No acceptance, no rejection, just presence. "This," she said, "is not a transaction." He nodded. "I know." Outside, the rain slowed. Inside, they didn't speak. They just stood, eye to eye, steady, calm. No title between them. No power to prove. No future to rush. Just two people who had once built something together, and maybe, quietly, were about to build something better. For the next few weeks, Eleanor didn't mention the shares. She didn't sign the documents. She didn't return them either. She left them untouched, on a shelf behind her desk, tucked between archived contracts and a framed diagram of her original predictive algorithm. She didn't need time to think. She needed time to observe. Because gestures, especially from men like Silas, often came wrapped in performance. But she wasn't looking for theater. She was watching his behavior and his credit. Silas didn't push. He didn't bring up the shares. He didn't ask if she'd made a decision. He showed up where he was needed, consulted quietly, let her lead without interruption. When reporters asked for comments, he referred them to her team. When clients sent praise his way, he redirected it with credit and clarity. He didn't try to look gracious. He just acted like it. That mattered. It was early evening when she finally called. "Tomorrow," she said. "Same cafe." After hours. She hung up before he could respond. At 6:37 p.m. the next day, she arrived first. This time, she wore no mask of professionalism. Hair loose, coat unbuttoned, a little tired, a little clearer. When Silas arrived, he looked the same as always. Calm, neutral, composed. But his hands were empty. No folders, no expectations. She took a sip of her drink, then looked at him. "I read through the agreement. I figured. I appreciate the language," she said. "No hidden terms, no footnotes. That took effort." "It didn't," he said. "Took honesty." She held his gaze, then placed a single sheet of paper between them. It wasn't signed. It wasn't blank. She'd written one line on it. "I don't want what I earned to be handed to me. I want it to be recognized without transaction." He read it twice, then looked up. "I understand." Eleanor leaned forward. "I'm not declining the shares because I'm proud," she said. "I'm declining them because I've finally built something I don't have to justify." Silas nodded. "I didn't offer them to make up for what I missed. I know I offered them because I thought giving you something tangible was the only way to prove I finally understood." Eleanor exhaled. "And now?" "Now I realize what you needed back then wasn't equity. It was clarity. It was me choosing you, even when no one was watching." She smiled faintly. "You're a little late." "I know." A long pause. Then he asked, "But am I still welcome?" Her voice didn't rise. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you stay when there's nothing left to fix." Silas didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for the paper, folded it gently, and slid it back to her. "I'm here," he said. "No transaction, no title, just me." She nodded once. That was no speech, no romantic moment, just a quiet agreement that presence, real, humble, quiet presence, was enough. A week later, Eleanor gave the signed papers to her legal team, not for the shares, but for a new joint initiative. She and Silas were co-funding a civic tech incubator based in the unfinished Fremont office. No names on the walls. No egos. Just a shared vision. This time, they didn't lead it as a couple, or as rivals, or as AEO and a partner. They led as two people who had finally let the past inform their choices, not control them. No one announced the launch. There was press event. But the first program, supported by the incubator, it was designed by two young engineers from their teams. One from Parton, one from Crane and Volt. Neither cared who was in charge. They just wanted to build something honest. That spring, Eleanor and Silas met on a bench near the coast. Not planned, not strategic. She was walking after a long call with the Department of Energy. He was eating a sandwich in the quiet, reading a paperback novel. She sat beside him without asking. He offered her a bite. She declined. They said nothing for a few minutes. Then she said, "I kept the paper. I know. Still haven't shredded it. I wouldn't." Silas didn't look at her. She didn't need him to. That moment didn't need punctuation. Only air. Only shared stillness. 7 months passed. No grand endings. No headlines. Just slow change. The federal project reached final implementation ahead of schedule. The Department of Transportation issued a quiet, internal note praising exceptional leadership coordination and system resilience under pressure. Eleanor read the memo once, then filed it away. Didn't need a press quote. She had deliverables. Silas, no longer CEO of Crane and Volt, had formally transitioned into advisory work. He wasn't removed. He wasn't forced out. He just tapped down, stepped back. For the first time in over a decade, he wasn't the face of a company. He was just a man deciding what kind of life he wanted to build when ambition was no longer a shield. The Civic Tech Incubator opened quietly. 3 programs launched in the first quarter. 1 focused on disaster response networks, 1 on urban mobility, and 1 on ethical data storage. Eleanor sat in on the first round of proposals. Silas didn't. He helped build the review framework, then left it in others' hands. He didn't hover, didn't ask for credit, didn't make himself visible, unless someone needed him. Eleanor noticed, and slowly, so did everyone else, because the absence of control speaks just as loudly as presence once did. In her personal life, Eleanor simplified. She stopped saying yes to every invitation that sounded like opportunity. She stopped accepting apologies that came with explanations. She started reading again, started baking on Sundays, started remembering who she was before her name was attached to other people's ambitions. She didn't date. She didn't avoid it either. She was just still for once, and it was enough. Silas moved into a small apartment above a bookstore he liked. No view, no driver, no meetings stacked on the hour. He took walks in the morning, talked less, slept more. People still asked him, "What's next?" He stopped answering because he was no longer trying to chase next. He was trying to learn now, and sometimes that looked like saying no to a panel. Sometimes it looked like planting herbs in a window box. Sometimes it looked like not calling Eleanor, even when he wanted to, because he knew her silence wasn't distance anymore. It was healing, and that kind of silence wasn't his to interrupt. They didn't text every day, didn't schedule check-ins, but every now and then she'd send him a screenshot from a news story about their former teams doing well. Or he'd send her a line from a book he was reading, with no context. Just this reminded me of something we once misunderstood. That was enough. No pressure, no demand, just mutual presence, showing up gently. One day, Eleanor received a package. No return address. Inside, a hardcover first edition of a book she once said she loved but never bought. Tucked inside was a small note card. One sentence. Some things are better when not rushed. She smiled, didn't text back, just placed the book on her desk and left it unopened for a week, letting things arrive in their own time. At the incubator, a young developer asked Eleanor if she and Silas were ever going to run a project together again. She smiled politely. "Maybe," she said. "Would you lead it?" The developer asked. "I would just show up," she replied. "That enough?" It is when you've learned what not showing up costs. The young developer blinked, then nodded. Didn't ask further, but he remembered that line because it didn't sound like advice. It sounded like experience, and that's what she meant it to be. Silas, for his part, no longer measured success in volume or headlines. He measured it in quiet days, in being able to sit with himself and not rewrite the past, in remembering Eleanor's words, "You don't have to be perfect to be present. You just have to stop disappearing when it gets inconvenient." He hadn't understood it then. He did now. Wasn't a reunion. It wasn't a moment the world would notice. No cameras, no staged handshake, no big announcement. Just a city planning panel in a modest auditorium. 40 people, mostly mid-level officials, engineers, and policy researchers. Eleanor was one of the speakers. Silas was not. He sat in the back row, quiet, notebook on his lap, listening like a student, not a stakeholder. Eleanor stood behind the podium, clear and steady. No flash, no performance, just insight. She talked about the human cost of efficiency, how predictive systems don't always account for hesitation, how digital infrastructure must leave room for error, not to punish, but to adapt. Silas watched her hands as she spoke. How they moved now. Not sharply, not guarded, but fluid. Trusting the space she stood in, owning it. When she finished, the room applauded softly. She nodded, stepped down, and only then did she see him. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just still, acknowledging, respecting, being there. That the enough. After the event, the crowd filtered out. Small conversations, people exchanging cards. Someone asked Eleanor to consult on a local rollout in Portland. She said she'd consider it. Silas waited until the room emptied, then approached slowly, not to start something, but to let something continue. Eleanor looked at him, arms folded loosely. Still smiling for cameras? He tilted his head. Only when you're not looking. She gave a quiet laugh. It landed gently. He gestured toward the door. Walk? Outside, the late sun hit the city with a warm amber light. The sidewalks buzzed softly, not crowded, just alive. They walked side by side. Not close, not far. Joe, together. Eleanor slipped her hands into her pockets. I didn't expect to see you there. I didn't plan to come, he admitted. But when I saw your name, I didn't want to miss it. She nodded. You listened, of course. No, I mean, you really listened. I always listened, he said. I just used to wait for the part where I could respond. That made her stop walking. He turned. What? He asked. She looked at him, not surprised, but struck. That's the thing. That's exactly what you used to do. He offered a quiet smile. I know. I still catch myself wanting to fix instead of follow. Now I want to walk beside you. They kept walking. No more explanations. No pressure to turn the moment into anything it wasn't. At the corner, they paused at the crosswalk. She asked, You heading back home? Eventually. No meetings? None that matter more than this. They crossed the street. A gentle pause in the world. Eleanor stopped at a bookstore window. Her reflection merged with his. She glanced at him. Do you think we'll ever go back to what we had? He shook his head. No. Her eyes narrowed slightly. But then he added, because what we had was built on restraint and reputation. I don't want to go back to that. She nodded slowly. So, what then? We start from now. Nothing owed, nothing staged. Just now. She took a slow breath. I think I'd like that. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't ask for anything. He simply stood until she touched his wrist, gently, briefly. Then let go, not because it wasn't real, but because the moment didn't need to last forever to matter. 3 weeks later, Eleanor received an envelope at her door. No return address. Inside was a printout of an old company newsletter from 5 years earlier. An internal Q&A, back when Silas used to write short columns for employees. The final line of the piece, written long ago, read, "I believe leadership isn't about taking credit. It's about recognizing the people you'd still follow, even if you lost your title." Beneath that line, a post-it note. "I never knew I was talking about you. Now I do." No signature. She placed it in her notebook. No reply. Just a place held. Sometimes they saw each other. A walk, a shared session, a silent nod across a room. They didn't try to explain it to anyone. They didn't need to, because the people who matter don't need to be told what's real. They recognize it in how you move and how you stay. The biggest growth doesn't always come from getting back what you lost. Sometimes it comes from realizing you never needed to be chosen louder. You just needed to stop waiting for someone else's timing to make peace with your own. Let go of the version of love that asks you to shrink. Choose the version that honors your voice, even in silence. If this story made you reflect, share a quiet moment you once misunderstood until you saw it for what it really was. And if you believe presence speaks louder than performance, drop A in the comments. Subscribe to Romance Stories with Mr. Daniel for more grounded, honest stories like this one.